Welcome back to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show, or at least that's what we normally do. Today we're talking about Pantheon, which is a new series that just came onto Netflix. However, it's not technically new. It was released in September of 2022. The first season was on AMC Plus. Second season was released in 2023. However, I think the majority of people haven't seen the second season until right now because of its appearance on Netflix. And let me just tell you, it is an adult animated science fiction drama television series, probably the best cerebral show that I've seen since Dark, that also provides answers to what's going on, all the questions, or at least the major ones that you care about, without feeling like they were just pulling it out of their ass. This isn't Lost. It's not like where it could have easily been, but it feels like the showrunner, or at least the source material that they're pulling from, which I'm just now learning they had short stories that they were using.
Yeah.
That doesn't take away from the show at all. It still does something that I've never seen before, and it almost feels like the show went too fast in the second season, where I do want them to go back if they ever got a third season and just give me side missions. You don't even you've already answered everything for me. I'm good with how it turned out. I don't need it to even be extended upon. It just needs to tell me some of the stories about the characters who were on the side who I'm curious about, because we never got to see the ending for them.
You're saying it almost kind of how Half-Life 1 came out, then Half-Life 2, and then Half-Life 3 never came out, but they gave you Half-Life 2 Episode 1, and they gave you kind of all those short missions that you could do for them.
Didn't they give you Half-Life Alpha or whatever that series was?
But
the VR one. And VR is such an important thing here. I'm not going to give spoilers right at the top, because it feels like this is a series that I need to recommend to anybody who's on the fence. If you're on the fence, go watch it right now, because I'm going to give this a really, really high score, and I don't want to ruin anything more for you than what you may have already had ruined for you.
Yeah, and I also wanted to kind of go off of that, because this show reminds me so much of Edge of Tomorrow, the 2014 Tom Cruise movies. It was loved by critics, it was loved by the audience, 7.9 on IMDb, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes for Edge of Tomorrow.
You're talking about Live, Die, Repeat, right?
Yes, yeah.
Where he just it's a Groundhog Day effect for him.
Right.
That is an insult to this show.
I know. Here's the thing. I know that you did not like that movie, but it's also considered one of the best action films of the 2010s. Same thing here with Pantheon. Pantheon is loved, it seems like, by everyone. Critics, audience, doesn't matter. It has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, 8.4 on IMDb. Usually I wait to give that type of stuff till the end, but I just thought you like it already, and yeah, it seems like everyone does.
Yeah, and this isn't really a bias. It's just the fact that I think it's so important to come out now as the AI explosion is happening. It's amazing to think that in 2022, that means it was already written, that it was already they were describing this stuff in the medium, and it just either ChatGPT has helped with the timing, or it's just was so, it saw the future so clearly. The scary thing, though, is that it's not a happy story. That's what's sad to me, is in the first season, it kind of left off on a glimmer of love and solace, and you kind of understand that there's tragedy, but ultimately humanity still exists in a form that is recognizable. By season 2, we're not eliminated, but it certainly presents kind of a story that seems all too possible if we ever do reach a chance to make ourselves a digitalized version of our personalities.
All the source material, if you want to call it that, was kind of used up because AMC Plus, and when they were pitched the show, said give us 2 seasons. So season 1 came out, and then they already had season 2 ready, and then AMC Plus pulled it, came out on Amazon. It was only available in Australia and New Zealand, and kind of like we've talked about, in February of 2025, that's finally when it seems like people are really starting to be able to see it for the first time.
And I am still curious about going back and checking out the books, because they did clearly change some things from season 1 to season 2. Primarily the age of the main character, Maddie, because she falls in love with the other main character in the second season. However, she's 14, I think, in the first season.
Right.
And then suddenly she's 17 in the second season, and he's been 18 the entire time. So the first season, I can understand why they aged him up. They didn't want to pull a Romeo and Juliet on us. However, it was very important that they had each other in that regard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been as different from because he's a clone, from his Steve Jobs counterpart, who is kind of a monster monster.
Are you talking about Stephen Holstrom?
Stephen Holstrom is, again, the Steve Jobs of this universe. He has died like Steve Jobs. However, he has uploaded his intelligence and he's waiting for his clone, similar to House of the Scorpion, to come and save his life by fixing the code. And then he's going to kill his clone and take over the internet as a god.
And he was voiced by William Hurt. This was actually William Hurt's final role.
Fantastic.
So
I mean, not that he passed away, but it's awesome that they got the voice cast that they did. I usually don't care at all. And honestly, if you told me that I didn't know any of these people, then I would have been just as happy with this show because it's not about that.
But yeah, one of my questions, because you talked about it a little bit at the beginning, there was time dilation. So there are a lot of time jumps I read that happened in season 2, and I wanted to know how it went about. How'd you feel about it?
Well, isn't it crazy though? Because the time jumps that really matter only happen after they finish off the arc about the guy trying to become a god. You think Stephen Holstrom, who again cloned himself and then had his lackeys who run this giant company called Logarithms or something like that, kind of just play it out over the next 20 some years, developing his clone into like an actual human being and teaching him almost in an identical fashion to the way that Stephen Holstrom's life, by having his dad be beating up on his mom, having his girlfriend die in front of him. Like all that stuff was supposed to happen with Caspian, but Caspian figured it out with Maddie's help that was what was happening. And so he went and he took over Logarithms. And in the second season, he gets betrayed, and the Stephen Holstrom clone, or the Stephen Holstrom original, wakes up and he's taken over the internet, or at least what people have used the internet for. It's a little bit different than the internet you would say in our world. But by episode 5, I think, there's 7 episodes, right? In the second
there's
season?
8 episodes.
There's 8 episodes. Okay, so episode 6, I think, is when they take care of the Stephen Holstrom arc and they get rid of him as a threat by literally having Caspian upload his intelligence to fight him and kind of absorb each other. And then they have this cybersecurity lost monster. Remember that smoke monster?
Yes.
So here we're getting into real spoilers here. So anybody, last chance to get out if you haven't seen it and are curious about it. The smoke monster comes in, it absorbs both of them, and that's the end of Stephen Holstrom as a threat. And you're just like, was that the series?
I know that you said that the monster absorbs them, but it seems like almost Caspian pulled like a kamikaze there. Like he was like,
He realized he was the only one who could take out his former self. And so by uploading himself directly, he killed himself, because the process to get yourself from just on Earth into the sky is just like in the show Upload, where they have to kill you. And
Right.
It's painful, or at least in some of the ways that we've seen it. Every country had started off with this upload thing and they were keeping it a secret as a project. But by the end of the series, it seems like it's a fairly routine procedure that people have. So I'm sure that it becomes less painless. But by the time that Caspian does it, I'm assuming he was feeling the pain when he got uploaded into the cloud. And then which is funny because I remember when Steve Jobs announced the cloud. So it's crazy that they made a show sort of like mocking him. And yeah, so it's a battle between the three of them: the good guy Caspian, Steve Jobs or Stephen Holstrom, and the smoke monster, who is sent by the governments to kill all these uploaded intelligences who they're afraid are going to launch nukes at people via the internet and start pandemics, because that is what Stephen Holstrom wanted to do. He wanted to create a pandemic on Earth and cause everybody to feel like they should upload onto the internet to survive.
And so that therefore they would only be alive on the internet? Is that how it would work?
Right. And so what he did was he went for the sap stories. He went to the people who are tragically ill, those with like progeria, people who aren't going to be here very much longer, and gave them a second chance and said, we can upload you today, knowing full well that the government will then have to pull their security program, this black mist that's eating all the famous UI characters. And so that's what ends up happening. Is there's this big battle, and Stephen Holstrom is dead, and Caspian is about to die to the Black Mist. And that's where an earlier version of this isn't a UI, it's not an uploaded intelligence, and it's not an artificial intelligence. It's kind of a mix of the two, called MIST, and Modular Integrated Source Template. It was the cure, because originally when uploaded intelligences went into the cloud, this sounds insane, right?
Yeah.
when they went into the cloud, they had an error that ended up bugging them out, and they would die off after a little while if they used too much power. Now, the answer came with like love, and they were able to like put love into a formula, and that was Mist, and Mist is technically Maddie's sister.
Wait,
We
wait,
can't
wait,
get
wait,
into the
wait.
details of
So,
this.
but you're saying when you're saying love, do you mean just like what exactly are you talking about?
Okay. So, for those who haven't seen it, in the first season, right, you have uploaded intelligences popping up in a lot of different countries. And the same problem persists with all of them, which is that if they overclock, if they try using too much brain power, because they're all very smart computer people that are up there, they're usually engineers or people who knew how to code really well, they would end up fizzling out. And a lot of them couldn't work unless they had all their memories because they were too lazy. Without proper motivation, like your family and stuff, all they did was play solitaire all the time. And
Yep.
so what ended up happening was they had to give them their memories, but their memories also ate at them. And so Caspian had to create the fix, which was what Stephen Holstrom had been saving him for to do, except that Stephen Holstrom's original plan was to wait till Caspian was 33 years old, and Caspian learned about it way too early, and other countries started getting upload intelligence, the ability to do that too early. So he at 18 has to solve this problem, and he does it with our other main character's dad, Maddie's dad, David, and this other character from the first season who tragically doesn't really appear in the second season too much, Lori Lowell, and he uses their code to make Mist, which Mist then kind of can insert herself into any UI that's uploaded and give them the fix so that they kind of become a god. Yeah.
And therefore they actually like start doing something. I imagine they're no longer lazy anymore. They can kind of.
No, so the laziness went away immediately when they got their memories. But
Oh,
once they
okay.
had their memories, then they started to work hard. And when they worked hard or they taxed themselves, that's when the flaw became obvious. They started glitching out because they weren't full, I guess, weren't fully human. And so again, the love thing, usually that would be where I like checked off the ship. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is some sappy, corny Hollywood bullshit. But instead, they really did, I think, in the best way possible, make it work and make it seem almost mathematic in the way that he went about solving this. Because the clone version was only able to solve it with Maddie's help. And the only reason he accepted Maddie's help was because Stephen Holstrom, he hadn't had the full tragic childhood that Holstrom had had. He hadn't lost everybody. The tragedy with Stephen Holstrom is that his ending goal was the same one that Caspian and the world ended up going towards, except he didn't care that he had to start a pandemic to get there. What we learn is that 20 years after his death, after Stephen Holstrom's its final death, the one in where he fights Caspian,
Right.
the world has done exactly what he wanted it to. So if he had just been patient, as opposed to trying to release a pandemic and kill a lot of people, they would have gotten there anyways.
So
Everybody would have uploaded anyways.
it was already kind of doomed to fail, right?
What was?
Well, you're saying that Stephen Holstrom, even though he died,
Yes.
had he just kind of stayed alive, he would have saw that his vision kind of became complete,
Yes,
right?
but it would have happened slower. He wanted everybody to upload the next year. He wanted to force it. He wanted to rip that Band-Aid off. Instead, it happened slowly as the world continued with global warming and people saw that this was an easy chance to live forever. It took like 20 years and they were able to solve a lot of issues like cancer and all that stuff. But people still decided that they wanted to live forever, so they all uploaded. So 20 years later, Caspian wakes up and we're like, how did he survive that internet cybersecurity program, the Black Mist thing? And that's when it's revealed that Mist came in at the last second. She was angry at Maddie. Don't get me in on that, because that would probably be one of the weaker points of the show, where Maddie, as a human, pisses off a computer and
Yeah,
just
I
like
saw that.
insults her.
I saw that small part. It was sad. Like she started like really like yelling at this robot, and the robot reminded me of a cross between like BB-8 and Sunny.
Sunny,
Yeah.
absolutely, from the other Apple series. But they patch things up by the end, and that's the nice thing is things happen at a fast pace. Miss comes in there, freezes time, and because she's super powerful. Had she been around from the very beginning, they could have beat Stephen Holstrom in an instant, but instead it got really, really close. She pulls Caspian out. However, his code is so mixed with this like cybersecurity threat that they call SafeSurf that when she wakes him up 20 years later, she still hasn't picked it all out of him. He only has a certain amount of time before it takes over his body again. However, it's not contagious. It
And
can't.
is this
It's kind of like Venom in a way.
yeah, I was actually gonna make that comparison, but is this like a for sure thing? Like there's no way that he's going to be able to defeat this?
Right. So, in a yeah, that's a tough question.
Okay.
We'll get there. But she wakes him up in the future, and obviously a lot has changed. Maddie is 20 years older. One of the last things we saw, the interactions between Caspian 18 and Maddie being like 16, 17, they had sex. She got pregnant, and now they have a kid together.
That's like Terminator.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And so the kid is actually older than Caspian was when he died. And so when Caspian comes back to Earth, sort of in Matrix form, they're able to upload him into one of those electronic bodies. And for some reason, Maddie hasn't decided to upload at this point. She's kind of realized that she's against it because her dad died, and he came back as an upload, but then she had to watch him die. And she says a lot of very kind of interesting lines in the series that just make you think. They make you sit back and think. And one of them is like, if everyone lives forever, how does anyone ever grow up? If so much of growth happens from you losing the loved ones in your life, from having the chance to mature and show yourself, I guess, to the world as your own person. But if everybody exists forever, then you're kind of suffocated.
Well, one of my favorite movies, and I don't want to give it away, but it's Such a Beautiful Day by Don Hertzfeldt,
Right.
and the ending kind of talks about, yeah, if people live forever, it would be ridiculous. Like you would start like forgetting the people that you knew and just like your
Well,
memories. You
that's
would
the
be like,
difference is like if you're an uploaded intelligence, you'd never forget them.
right.
But you would certainly think, I guess, you would compartmentalize them to a point where they wouldn't be as significant to you anymore. Because, for instance, Maddie's mom uploads. By the 7th episode, this is when we get all this new information, and she overclocks, which means that she's able to live many, many years within a couple days. And so she actually marries the best friend of her husband, and they live a happy life for 80 years.
In that way, isn't it also like Tron?
But then they
like,
broke up. Yeah, go ahead.
because in that same world, wasn't it like a video game world where like the seconds in real time were like years
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
the
time
game?
dilation is, and the coolest thing though is that you can also underclock. So later on, when Maddie, this is in the final episode, kind of has everyone like Safe Surf gets out and it starts to kill all the remaining humans, and then Caspian I think dies again, and she's really left with no one. Her son dies, and it's before he's uploaded, and she's not on good terms with Mist. And then she has like this moment where she realizes that the one thing she wants to do in the world is I guess live forever and kind of try it again. So Westworld style. The last thing that Dolores says is let's try it again. Maddie actually gets the opportunity, and we see her underclock her brain and her computer until she has all the elements accrued. So she spends the next few hundred thousands of years not really thinking every single day. She would have gone insane.
Yeah, right.
But like underclocking so that it didn't feel that long. And then she developed her own computer in the sky using literally a sun. And then she started making other universes. So she became a god.
So yeah, I mean, can everyone just make a different
That's one
universe
of
in
the
that
things they
way?
didn't talk about. So, but that's a good question. I do believe anyone that's been uploaded could do what she did and may have done what she did. So it really does make the simulation theory universe thing kind of scary to think about how by the end we see her in front of just hundreds of thousands of different little ball universes, very similar to Fiona and Cake.
Mhm.
Remember, there was like that one character, Kumail Nanjiani's
Right.
character, right? Where he was
Well,
in,
he was the one, yeah, but you're talking about the 4th episode where they kept on showing the different worlds that there
yeah,
were.
it's very multiversy. It's very Loki by the end. It's very Futurama. We see many times where they end up going full circle around time. They go to the end of
Yeah.
time and then
No,
go
yeah, I do
back
remember
again.
that.
It's very dark in that, and it's very Legion. But
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, yeah.
yeah, and I feel like we're jumping through so much, but the ending that really gets you is that Maddie's able to pick her favorite universes, the ones that are closest to her own. In Pole, she's the god, so she can control them. They're simulations that she's made. They're little rim worlds, but all of them feel real to the people inside of them. So she's able to bring her dad back from those, even though her dad in her own universe is dead. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yes.
She's made a billion universes and she's able to cherry pick her dad out of the ones, and she has conversations with him, and she uses him to make more universes exactly like her, which you would think would then tackle down the line and make millions of versions of her making their own versions of millions of it's so mind bendy, but it's really cool because by the end she is able to fix almost everything. She just jumps into the one that's closest to hers, saves Caspian at the very end, saves her dad. So when you asked if Safe Surf, the thing that was in Caspian,
Yeah.
was going to kill him, not necessarily, not if he's part of the simulation, because then she could just go in there and save him. But then she finds out by saving him that she was in a simulation of the Safe Surf being.
So even so, layers upon layers. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does such a good job of explaining it, better than I am just in the but for anybody who's watched it and then is like, "I don't understand." Maybe what I'm saying makes a little bit more sense, but what I compare it to mostly, honestly, it makes me appreciate Interstellar more because I
Interstellar.
hated the ending of Interstellar. It made absolutely no sense to me, and this is the spoiler for the ending of Interstellar if you haven't seen it 10 years after it came out. But remember when Matthew McConaughey,
Yeah, it's the
he gets
wormhole.
stuck
Yeah.
into that, yeah, into the wormhole, and then there's, like, those evolved humans who help him through this weird library thing.
Yeah.
This actually makes that make sense. If he is in sort of a simulation of those older humans, those are like the Maddies or the Safe Surfs, and he is the one that she was manipulating, similar to how she manipulated her dad or Caspian, and, by doing that, he's able to fix his universes, or connect with his daughter in a different time.
It's funny because
Yeah,
Neil deGrasse Tyson, I know he had a problem with Gravity. I think he also had a problem with Interstellar, but he's someone who actually voices a character here as
it's hard
well.
to have a problem with this stuff because the leaps that it does, again, the 20-year leap and then the millions upon billions of year leap that it does, makes it hard to cherry pick, like, or pick apart and say that's wrong. Like they couldn't
Right.
do that. You don't know.
Why
It's a
why
possibility.
that
It's profound, but it's a
what's
possibility.
so funny is that, yeah, usually films that take place in the future, people can easily cherry pick, but here it seems like they're
You mean
making
pick
such
apart?
yeah,
Yeah,
pick apart, be like, that
nitpick,
can happen.
nitpick.
But this is taking place, I guess, like, so long in the future
Right.
that, like, you can't
But it's
really
bleak because it means that her reality, the one that she came from, is not the one that she's saving. She's
right,
created a lot of realities to give herself a sense of accomplishment and feel like she's unable to bring these people back. But the one that she came from is dead. Just like the ones that she's made, their versions of them also lost. So the question becomes, her was she the original
right.
or was there one before
So
her?
they don't answer that.
They do,
Oh, okay.
because by Caspian having talked to her right before her son dies and telling her that number, which was actually Safe Surf telling her that, that means she's not the original.
Mm,
That the version that we watched, that there was someone looking over their shoulder. There was a god, which means I don't know what happened in the original timeline. You can only guesstimate. And the saddest tragic part is that if you think about it, she wasn't particularly happy in the end. Like, yes, she was able to bring back a version of Caspian and send her dad back in, but like she is so sick of it at that point. She's like, I liked it when I was just a kid. I wish I could just do that. So what she does is she uploads her intelligence from the cloud into one of the random universes that she's made, one that's very similar, but back to when she was like 12, 13 years old, close to at the start of the series. And she did the same with the Caspian person that she pulled out of one of the universe. They kind of agreed to do this together. So there is some she's surviving in that way. She's like, I just want to experience that again and not remember everything. So she's like, she cleared her brain, jumped into one of those. And I'm assuming when she dies in that universe, she'll pop up back in the regular and be like, oh yeah, now I've had that experience. But is that the rest of her entire infinity? Is her jumping universes, deleting her mind, reliving her life?
just
That's
this cycle.
bleak.
Yeah.
In the first season, it was like you watched a young girl save her dad. Yes, her dad tragically still passes, but he does it in a such a I'm going to save the world, and this is proper. I'm doing this for the rest of my family. And there's so much potential. It's like if you spent the first episode of a series watching a young kid or a teen like get into their best school, and like you can't wait to see what happens in their story. And the next episode starts with them being an 80-year-old with cancer about to die. And you're just like, what happened to your potential? I want to see the intermediate years. And that's what I mean when I say I want to go back on a lot of the storylines if they ever got a third season, and just give me little pieces of every episode. Could be anybody, but the intermediate years, even Mist, who I thought I wouldn't like as a character, tell me what happened with her over time. And this is just an incredible show. Have I
Well,
said that?
dialing it back a little bit because I know that you like this story, but let's just talk a tiny bit about the animation. This is made by Titmouse. They have people
Oh,
that work on
Titmouse, of course.
Scavenger's Reign, The Boys Present, Diabolical, Agent Elvis, Digman, Royal Crackers, anything you can really think of. How is the animation? Does it look good?
So crazy how like 80% of the show will be so technical, and then sometimes it will be about the conversations between the characters having little tiffs with each other. But then when it gets to those action scenes and you get the climactic fights between the characters, I mean they went all out with that. And then the animation of even the intro is very cool. But I think you compared the one scene that you saw where it was Stephen Holstrom versus Caspian
Yeah.
as very similar to
Doctor
Doctor
Strange,
Strange
yeah.
versus Spider-Man when they go into the mirror world.
Because they're able to, like what I saw, they were able to, like, slice buildings and, like, throw it to each other, and it
My
just
my favorite animation, I think, though, was when it went sort of for all mankind-ish or gravity-ish in the last episode, where we see Maddie take the final leap into the future, or the final leaps into the future. It's kind of like that old science. What was the movie that really kicked off the AI computer thing? The one that ends with a baby. You know,
Oh, was that 2001: A Space
Yes,
Odyssey.
it's sort
Yeah.
of got that, like, view to it. It's super cool to see space when they make it detailed, and sometimes cartoons don't do that. Like, if you're looking at Solar Opposites, no offense, it's a little it's like a five-year-old's version of it, but this they put some effort
I
into.
know that they said that the view of the future for Pantheon, was less robotic, because it was wanting to show technology as an expansion of kind of technology in human civilization.
Yeah.
So
The weirdest thing, though, is, like, I was ready after episode 6, or up until episode 6, to talk mostly about the fact that the cure for the glitch was all about the UIs that were in there not having the capability to, like, figure out how to, not about the motivation, but how they factored in their love within themselves.
right.
And then I was going to make this stunning comparison to in real life with their counterparts, the people who loved them, were also dealing with that same thing, and it was destroying them in a different way. And I thought it was so cool, and I can barely talk about that because of the fact that the rest of the show happened the way it did, and they decided to go in the most expansive route that I've ever seen. Like, you can't get more expansive than the end of humanity and the birth of, like, string theory and all these different versions of, and I'm glad they took the time to explain that
It
part of
does
it,
it does
but it does,
seem
yeah.
like with season 3, they wouldn't be able to go kinda beyond where they're at this point. It seems like season 3 would have to kinda be a prequel to everything that has happened.
That's what was sad when you saw the time leaps. You were like, "Oh, we're not going back." You
Yeah.
know? We're just gonna get back flashes, and the first season were all took place in a matter of months, and so you did feel like, at the end of it, there was no way that a show, was gonna do that, and it's also like a macro story versus a micro story, and it did both of them, and it showed how both could work really well, and that they were both very emotional, and so, yeah, I think I'm tired of, just giving so many props to the show. Let me rag on it and, think about that for a second. So, I wasn't the biggest fan of all of Maddie's decisions. I do think that she screwed up with the missed one. I do think that her future self, when not the one that ultimately became a god, but the version where she was a mom and not letting her, and she was still getting upset with Mist about trying to save her kid, and it felt like that one was a little rushed. as a person. Everybody else, and then also the mom's character deciding to upload without her daughter, felt like all that goodwill that we had with her and seeing how protective she was as a mom, it kind of went out the window. But all for a good cause. Yeah.
Are those your only cons with the show?
No, I mean, at one point they tried to solve the Middle East problem by having an Iraqi character and I think an Israeli character merge and become a mist type character. Seemed a little bit like just kind of half thought out, you know? It didn't work 100%. I thought that the smoke monster, they didn't do a great job defining why it turned from the safe surf, it turned against humanity. Like it was supposed to be working for humanity, and then it was supposed to be destroying the UIs. But when they brought it back, it destroyed all of humanity. It turned its robots against them. And the only explanation it gave was because it had determined that the UIs were the alpha. And I was like, okay. It also sometimes felt like when the UIs died, I was like, where's their backups? For specifically for Caspian, I was like, why didn't he have time? Now, part of that could be I would assume that they were on a time crunch. And so when he had to go face himself, Stephen Holstrom, in that universe, they probably didn't have time to like try to store him on a local drive or something. But given what happened to David, I feel like they would have tried to do that. Also, she named her kid Dave. So I understand naming your kid after your dad, but it does seem a little strange, especially if your ultimate plan is to bring back your dad at some point. It'd be a little confusing to have two Davids. Like maybe you could have made that his middle name. I don't know. But these are all so small in comparison. Mostly it's the nostalgia, I guess, that's making me the saddest. And that's kind of a theme in the show as well, is not missing the past as much as missing what the future could have been. And then it put the audience through that. And so those writers, damn, they were good. All right.
It has an 8.4 on IMDb, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, 94% audience score. Season 3, there has been a push for people to make it ever since it really hit Netflix. Because, like I said, it seems like everyone liked it. The Independent referred to it as a masterpiece. IGN gave the season a 7 and called it wildly ambitious.
I will also say one of my problems with the show is Stephen Holstrom's girlfriend, who also played the mom, or who was the mom of Caspian. She was made into such an evil character. And then in the 7th episode, they just resolve her storyline instantly with just showing her uploaded and then gotten eaten by the safe surf monster. So yeah, there was that. There was the fact that a few of the other Lori Lowell never got like her final. She didn't get to live forever, and I feel like she deserved it, even if she didn't want to be brought back. The only reason she didn't want to be brought back in the first season was because she felt like she wouldn't actually love her boyfriend in the same way that version of her did, and I just was curious why Maddie decided to bring back only David and not a few of the other ones when she became a super god.
Was Caspian the one that had his parents, like, they weren't really his parents, they were, like, hired actors?
You're asking that now
Something?
after I've described
No,
it so
I
many
mean,
times?
like, I know, but, like, the thing is that
yeah, the mom is Stephen Holstrom's ex.
I understand,
Yes.
I know you
And the
you were
dad
talking
never
about
got an ending. The dad's been helping him out, the one who, like, betrayed Stephen Holstrom and ended up helping Caspian. We saw him as a fish market man, but I don't think we ever saw him, like, talk to his son again, which is also sad.
obviously in different ways. It was played for way more comedy in South Park, but it reminds me a lot of like when they hired an older Stan, I think, to try and talk to the younger Stan, but he was really just an actor.
But it was a real nature versus nurture type thing. Like, oh, we're not even going to bother to run the studies if this makes sense, but we're going to hire an actress to play his girlfriend. Later on, we learned that they were going to have that actress appear to be killed in a car accident in front of him, which would have been crazy to deal with. It was like he was in his own Truman Show for a while. And so, yeah, Caspian had to deal with a lot. I just feel like maybe his love story with Maddie was a bit rushed.
I know that just ending it with some production. Craig Silverstein said that the script came in for season 1, the pilot, in 2018. It was submitted, and then he had a partnership with AMC Plus. They threw out the idea that they could do anything animated if he didn't want to do live TV because he had worked on like The Old Man, Percy Jackson, The Olympians, and Bones. He was able to do it then, and then he feels he was able to get the huge cast because it was really during COVID that like they really started production, they all did their lines through Zoom, at least for season 1, and then, yeah, they were able to make season 1 and season 2 practically pretty fast, but
Mhm.
again, season 2 was pulled, so that's why it's coming out now.
It's I guess my last nitpicks for the show, because I wanna give at least a little credence to the fact that it's a 9 out of 10 for me as opposed to a 10 out of 10 for me. I would say that within 20 years to expect the bulk of all humanity to go up in the cloud, and the way they presented it was obviously an homage to all this anime, because like, there were fairies with wings and,
Yeah.
definitely like a Japanese style, and also a lot of the way that the council was built looked more like a Roblox council, where people could customize their own thing. There was a giant stone head. It's like, why would you want to live like that for your whole life? And everybody was very respectful with one another. However, it just kind of was like, you're not in a fairy tale land.
Stonehead remind me of, Rick and Morty.
Yes, it
Yeah.
did remind me of that. But honestly, this show has to be my second favorite adult animated cerebral show after Rick and Morty the anime, because that one's so much better than this. um, no, but yeah. So all in all, 9 out of 10. So many comparisons that I didn't ever get to talk about. Expanse, Buffy's, the girl who passed away really recently was the new sister who just came around in one of the later seasons. I think season 5. Mist is the equivalent here, and I thought that for that reason I wasn't going to like Mist that much, because they were going to introduce her as sort of an evil sister, and instead she fit in very well with the show. So yeah, great show, and I hope everybody else agrees with me. I will challenge anybody to find a real hater of it.
There was one review that I found that really liked the first season. It
Um,
was called Bubble Blabber, and they gave this season 4.5 out of 10, saying the narrative was a gigantic step down and everything felt disjointed, rushed, and didn't give the same weight of action we had in season 1.
I That's the micro versus macro, and I respect that actually, because they're not saying they hated the show. They just weren't a fan that it went a billion miles an hour in season 2, and that's fair, you know. So I take it back. That's a good complaint. If you're falling to that thing, I still recommend it to anybody who wants to see it, and for anybody who's seen the first season and wasn't going to tune into the second season, go check it out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.